power. It has many faces, some noble, others twisted. And in ancient Rome, it began with a crown. Long before legions marched across continents, before emperors carved their names into eternity, Rome was not an empire, it was a kingdom. A place of sacred temples and cruel thrones, a city built on blood and ambition. But what happens when kings forget the people they rule? When tyranny crushed justice beneath its heel? The answer lies in a single year, 509 BCE. This is the story of Rome's final king, a man whose name would be etched into history for greatness, but for disgrace. Tarquinius Superbus, the Proud. His reign was a reign of terror, senators silenced, citizens oppressed, and dignity stripped from the land. And yet, even the mightiest ruler cannot stop a spark once it catches fire. That spark. A woman named Lucretia, whose honor was stolen, and whose final breath would become a battle cry. Her tragedy would ignite a revolution. Her death would give rise to legends. From the shadows stepped a man few had feared before, Lucius Junius Brutus. A man once thought slow, now burning with purpose. He did not ask for war, but he would lead one. Against a king, against tyranny, for Rome. What followed was no simple change of rulers, it was a transformation of power. The monarchy fell. The crown was cast into the dirt, and in its place rose something new, radical, dangerous, visionary. A republic. The world would never be the same. Join us as we travel back through the echoes of betrayal, courage, sacrifice, and witness the death of kings and the birth of a nation. Before it was an empire, before it was a republic, Rome was a kingdom ruled not by the people, but by kings clothed in majesty and fear. For over 2 centuries, they stood at the heart of Roman power, forging a city from nothing, guiding it with both wisdom and cruelty. 7 kings, each leaving their mark on stone, law, and blood. The earliest of them, Romulus, was more myth than man, said to have been raised by wolves, founder of Rome itself, and its first ruler. He was a symbol of strength and divine destiny. But even Romulus vanished mysteriously, swallowed by the heavens, or perhaps the ambition of men. Over time, others followed. Some built great temples, others roads and walls. Servius Tullius, a visionary, introduced the census and class divisions. Yet even he, a king of humble beginnings, met betrayal in the palace halls. His blood would stain the marble floors. And then came the last, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. His rise to power was soaked in violence. He seized the throne through conspiracy and murder, casting aside tradition, ignoring the Senate, and ruling with unchecked authority. Rome, under his rule, no longer belonged to the people. The Senate became a shadow of itself. The voice of the citizen was silent. And fear ruled with him. But the power of kings is never eternal. Beneath the surface, discontent brewed. Among the people, among the nobles, even among those once loyal to the throne, it would take just one spark to ignite the fire. That spark came in the form of a woman, Lucretia, a noble Roman matron, known for her virtue, for her strength. Violated by Sextus, the king's own son, her final act was not just despairing, it was a declaration of war. Her death shattered the silence. Lucius Junius Brutus, her kinsman, her revenge arose from obscurity to become the voice of revolution. In the Forum, where kings once paraded in triumph, he stood before the Roman people and cried out for justice, for freedom, for Rome, no more kings. What followed would reshape the ancient world. The Tarquins would be cast out, the crown would be broken. In its place, a radical new idea. Government by law, not by man, power shared, checked, elected. It was the beginning of the Roman Republic, a system born from rebellion, destined for glory, and haunted always by the memory of monarchy. This is the story of that final fall, and the fierce birth of something greater. Before the Republic, before the Senate's decrees and the cries of the Forum, Rome was ruled by kings. 7 men some remembered with reverence. Others with fear shaped a rising city from a collection of tribes into a formidable power. Their reigns span over 2 centuries, each one laying a brick in the foundation of what Rome would become. Our journey begins not in certainty, but in myth. Romulus, the first king, and the first Roman. Legend claims he and his twin brother Remus were abandoned, suckled by a she-wolf, and raised by shepherds. Romulus, in a moment of fate or perhaps ambition, killed his brother and founded the city of Rome and the Palatine Hill in 753 BCE. He organized its people, formed a council of elders, the Senate, and abducted the Sabine women to ensure the city's future. When he disappeared in a storm, the people declared he had ascended to godhood. Rome was born in blood, divine will, and ambition. Numa Pompilius, a stark contrast to Romulus. A Sabine, a man of peace, a philosopher king, Numa built the religious institutions of Rome, the Vestal Virgins, the College of Pontiffs, and rituals to honor the gods. He forged unity not with the sword, but with sacred rites. His reign was one of calm, of sacred order. Tullus Hostilius, the pendulum swung back to war. Where Numa prayed, Tullus conquered. He led Rome to battle against Alba Longa, razing the city and absorbing its people. The myth of the Horatii and the Curiti, triplet champions fighting for their cities, emerged from his wars. Rome was growing, and its hunger for dominance was waking. Ancus Marcius, a grandson of Numa, Ancus returned to a balance of war and tradition. He expanded Rome's territory toward the sea and founded Ostia, the city's first port, giving Rome access to Mediterranean trade. He strengthened Rome's infrastructure with bridges and walls. Under Ancus, Rome was no longer a hilltop town, it was a city stretching outward. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the first Etruscan king, and the first not of Roman blood. He introduced bold, new architecture, constructing the Circus Maximus and the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer. His reign marked the beginning of Roman urbanism and Etruscan influence in Roman culture, but his ambition would make enemies, assassinated by the sons of Ancus. His rule ended with blood, but not defeat. Servius Tullius, a king born in fire, legend says his head once burned with flame as a child. Servius wasn't of noble birth, possibly a former slave, but he was a reformer and visionary. He reorganized Roman society by wealth, not just birth, introducing the census and dividing Romans into classes and centuries for military and voting purposes. His reforms gave structure to Roman politics that would echo through the Republic. But power breeds resentment. Servius was murdered in a palace coup. His own daughter, Tullia, and her husband orchestrated it. As his body lay in the street, crushed beneath a royal chariot, Rome's final king ascended. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, a tyrant by every measure. He seized the throne without the people or the Senate. He ruled by force and fear, executing senators, crushing dissent, and building vast monuments, not for the people, but for his legacy. The temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus was his crowning jewel. But even the strongest tyranny cannot stand forever. His reign would end not with glory, but disgrace, and with it the monarchy itself. These 7 kings, part myth, part man, left behind more than names. They forged Rome's early soul, its fears and dreams, its laws and legacies. But they also sowed the seeds of rebellion. Because when power clings too tightly, it breaks. And the people of Rome were ready to cast off their kings forever. Power, when unchecked, it grows monstrous. And in the final days of Rome's monarchy, power found its most ruthless vessel. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, better known to history as Tarquin the Proud. His name would echo not with admiration, but with dread. Born into a lineage of royalty, but fueled by ambition, Tarquin seized the throne not by succession, but by blood. In a cold and calculated move, he orchestrated the assassination of his father-in-law, King Servius Tullius. The Senate was bypassed, the people silenced. A king was murdered in his own palace, and a tyrant took his place. With a sneer of arrogance and a crown stained by betrayal, Tarquin proclaimed himself king. From that day forward, Rome no longer had a ruler, it had a despot. He abolished the rights of the Senate, ruling with an iron grip and turning the once deliberative body into a hollow formality. The will of the people became irrelevant. Tarquin built massive temples and military fortifications, but they weren't just for glory. They were symbols of oppression, built by forced labor, constructed on the backs of Romans, slaves, and even prisoners of war. Under Tarquin, fear was law. Voices of dissent were crushed. The streets whispered rebellion, but none dared speak aloud. His regime was marked by executions without trial, cruel taxation, and violent retribution. He used spies, tortured rivals, and ruled with suspicion as his closest advisor. Perhaps the most infamous symbol of his reign was the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, a monument to the gods built not with piety, but with blood. The king confiscated lands and forced citizens to labor without pay, their homes torn down for his ambition. Even the gods seemed silent as Tarquin's tyranny grew. But his downfall would not come through war or politics, it would come through a story as old as empires: personal vengeance. Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, was a reflection of his father's cruelty. Arrogant and untouchable, Sextus committed one of the most heinous acts in Roman history: the violation of Lucretia, a noble woman of unmatched virtue. She was not merely dishonored, she was destroyed. And in her tragic end, Rome found its spark of revolution. Lucretia's suicide shook the city. Her body, displayed for all to see, became a rallying cry. The people, once cowed into silence, now erupted in fury. Lucius Junius Brutus, once thought a fool, rose as a leader. His voice thundered through the forum: "By this blood, I swear vengeance on Tarquin and his brood." Tarquin, stunned by the sudden tide, attempted to cling to power. But Rome had awakened. No longer subjects, the people became citizens. Brutus led an uprising that swept through the city like wildfire. The king's palace was stormed, the royal family fled, and in their place, a new idea took root. The monarchy was abolished, the republic was born. Tarquin the Proud would spend the rest of his life in exile, watching from the shadows as the city he once ruled stood tall without him. His name would become a curse, and Rome, battered but free, would never kneel to kings again. Thus ended the tyranny of Tarquin, not with negotiation, but with defiance, not in silence, but in the roar of a republic's birth. Before steel clashed and the cry for liberty rang across Rome, there was a woman, Lucretia, a noble woman, a daughter, a wife, and tragically, a martyr. It begins not on the battlefield, but in the quiet chambers of a home filled with virtue. Lucretia was the embodiment of Roman honor. She was known across the city for her modesty, her loyalty, her strength in quietness. Her husband, Collatinus, boasted of her chastity, even among fellow Roman commanders. And so, in a twisted test of her virtue, a cruel seed was sown. Prince Sextus Tarquinius, the son of King Tarquinius Superbus, filled with lust and jealousy, visited Lucretia's home under the guise of kingship. That night, in the shadows of trust, he revealed his true intent. Armed with power and threats, he shattered her sanctity. Lucretia was violated, but Lucretia, even in grief, would not allow silence to swallow her story. She summoned her father and her husband. With them came Lucius Junius Brutus, a man whose own family had suffered under the tyrant king. Before them, with tearless strength, Lucretia revealed the vile act, She made it clear her body had been dishonored, but her soul remained loyal. And then, with a dagger drawn, she uttered the words that would echo through history. Though I acquit myself of blame, I do not free myself from punishment. With one swift motion, she fell by her own hand. Her blood was the first drop spilled in Rome's rebellion. In that moment, the grief of Brutus turned into fury. He held her lifeless body high before the people and cried out, not in sorrow, but in wrath. By this blood, most pure before it was polluted by royal lust, I swear no more kings shall rule Rome. It was the spark, a cry not just for justice, but for revolution. The people, enraged by tyranny and moved by her tragic end, rose in one voice. Brutus led the charge. The king, Tarquinius Superbus, was driven into exile, and with him, the corrupt bloodline of the Tarquins. Out of pain was born a new order, the Republic. Rome would never again be ruled by a king. Lucretia's death was not the end of a story. It was the birth of a new age. Her legacy was freedom. Her memory, carved into the bedrock of a republic that would echo through millennia. The streets of Rome had known silence, but on this day, they trembled beneath the roar of a people awakened. Lucretia's death was no longer a private tragedy. It had become a spark, one that found dry kindling in every Roman heart worn thin by tyranny. Her blood, pure and unjustly spilled, now cried out louder than any sword ever could. Brutus stood over her body, face carved with fury. His voice, once quiet and careful in the court of kings, now thundered across the Roman hills. Swear it with me, he cried, his arm raised toward the gods. No man shall ever again call himself king of Rome. And the people answered. No more would they bow to a line of kings drunk on power. No more would they tolerate the cruelty of Tarquinius Superbus, who had ruled not as a father of Rome, but as its captor. Brutus seized the moment. As thousands gathered, Brutus climbed the steps of the Forum, his cloak flaring in the wind. With one hand gripping Lucretia's bloodied dagger, and the other raised in command, he declared the Tarquin monarchy abolished. Let Rome belong to the people. And just like that, one of the greatest revolutions in ancient history began. Tarquinius, caught unprepared, attempted to calm the storm. But his words, once law, were now drowned in the cries for freedom. He fled the city like a thief in the night, his crown meaningless, his legacy shattered. Brutus and Collatinus were declared the first consuls of Rome, leaders chosen not by birth, but by the will of the citizens. It was a system untried, fragile, new, but it was theirs, with banners waving and cries of Libertas. On every street, Rome was reborn not as a kingdom, but as a republic. But revolution does not end with words. Tarquinius, driven by pride and vengeance, sought to return, marching toward Rome with allies and armies. But the people did not bend. They stood, citizen and soldier, side by side, defending what had only just been born. Brutus himself would lead the resistance not as a noble, but as a father of the Republic. And in the ultimate sacrifice, he would fall in battle, killed not by foreign enemies, but by his own sons, who betrayed him in secret to restore the monarchy. Yet even then, Brutus did not falter. When his sons were exposed, he did not hesitate. He condemned them to death, putting Rome before blood. The crowd wept not only for his pain, but for the strength of his conviction. That was the price of freedom. And Brutus paid it. The monarchy was gone. In its place, a republic forged in fire, mourning, and justice. A republic that would endure invasion, civil war, and centuries of strife, rising one day to become an empire. But its beating heart would always return to this moment, this revolution, this promise, that no man would ever again rule Rome as king. The streets of Rome were not quiet in 509 BCE. They trembled not from foreign invasion, but from a revolution within. The monarchy had crumbled, and from its ashes, something radical, something unseen in Roman history was born, the Republic. For over 2 centuries, Rome had been ruled by kings, men said to have divine favor and unquestioned authority. But now, the city stood at a crossroads. The expulsion of Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the last king of Rome, created a vacuum, one not filled by another monarch, but by a daring new experiment in governance. It was an idea born of necessity, of rage, and of resolve, a government not of one man, but of many. A republic, res publica, the public affair. In the days following the revolution, two men emerged as Rome's first consuls, Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. Their names would be etched into the fabric of Roman identity. Their role, to ensure no single man could ever again crown himself king. Power was to be divided, checked, and rotated. Each consul would rule for a single year, always with the other beside him, a partnership forged in the ashes of tyranny. But Rome's transformation was not only political, it was deeply cultural. The Roman people were redefining themselves. The very word rex, king, became taboo. Even the accusation of seeking kingship was now grounds for exile or execution. The Romans swore an oath. They would never again submit to a monarch. And yet, the Republic was not born perfect. Though it claimed to serve the people, the earliest years were dominated by the patricians, Rome's aristocratic elite. They held the consulships, the priesthoods, and the courts. The commonest plebeians were expected to serve in war and labor, but were denied a voice. Tensions simmered, but still, this new republic was unlike any political system of its time. In an age of pharaohs, emperors, and kings, Rome chose to innovate. They created institutions that would inspire future republics across the world. Elected officials, checks and balances, term limits, and codified laws. The Roman Senate, once an advisory council to kings, now became the heart of debate and policy. Its members, drawn from noble families, wielded great influence. Though unelected, their sway would shape Rome's destiny for centuries. Meanwhile, assemblies of the people were born gatherings where citizens could vote on laws, elect magistrates, and make their voices heard. A foundation was laid for civic duty, for political participation, for patriotism rooted not in loyalty to a monarch, but to the republic itself. This bold system would face countless challenges: internal rebellion, external invasion, and political corruption. But for now, Rome had declared something extraordinary to the world. That power could belong not to one man, but to the people if they were willing to defend it. As the sun rose over the 7 hills, the Roman Republic was no longer a dream. It was reality. It was fragile, imperfect, and contentious, but it was alive. And it would endure, not 4 years, but 4 centuries. In the heart of ancient Italy, a new chapter in human governance had begun. History is more than dust and dates. It is a mirror, a reflection of who we are, and who we dare to become. The story of Rome's transformation from monarchy to republic is not just a tale of the past. It is a warning, a triumph, a question. What happens when power is challenged? When a people say enough and take their destiny into their own hands? Rome's first citizens lit a fire that would burn for centuries. Not for kings, not for crowns, but for freedom, for law, for voice. And though the Roman Republic would face war, corruption, and collapse, its birth marked a turning point in human civilization. A moment when ordinary people became the architects of their own fate. So we ask you, what can we learn from them today? In a world still wrestling with power, justice, and liberty, these echoes from the past speak louder than ever. If you found meaning in this moment of history, let it not end here. Subscribe to Echoes of the Past to walk deeper into the stories that shaped empires, shattered thrones, and forged legends. Leave a comment below. What does Republic mean to you today? And if this story moved you, share it Let the voices of the ancients reach new ears. Because history isn't behind us, it's within us.